tell you what, I'll record it just. Okay, so Sarah, I'm going to record this session and I'll upload it to YouTube. So if you want, you can just go through that. So that will help. Okay, so coming back. So today we are going to talk about some problems. The first problem that we are going to discuss is write a program that will output a 1 if the number, so write a program that will ask the user for a particular number, and if that number is a multiple of 7 and that number is odd, you need to output 1. Otherwise, or for all other cases, we would output a 0. Right, so if the user provides a number, let's say 7, I should print out 1. If the user gives you the number 35, I should print out a 1 again. However, if the user provides a number, let's say 20, that is not a multiple of 7 and not a odd number, I should print out 0. So does that problem make sense? So I am going to type out the answer to this thing, but essentially, does this make sense to you guys, what we are requiring? So the main goal of this is to write this entire program without using if statements, but first we are going to write it with if statements, right? So the main logic behind this is, if the user provides a number, let's say the number is n, let's say in 10, I will ask the user for this number n, and then after that we would print out 1 if it's a multiple of 7 and an odd number, or I would print out 0 if it's not a multiple of 7 or an odd number or anything else. So, so in this situation, what we need to do here is we can use an if condition that states if the number n is a multiple of 7. Now, how do we check if a number is a multiple of 7? Anyone? Modulo operator, right? Exactly. So the modulo operator is an interesting thing that lets us check exactly. You guys are right. So the modulo operator is a very nice thing, because if we divide by a certain number and the remainder becomes 0. So in this situation, 4 mod 4 was 0 or 8 mod 4 was 0, right? So that means that there is no remainder. We can also infer this to mean that that particular numerator, in this case 4 or 8, is a multiple of the denominator, that is 4, right? So in only those situations would we get a remainder of 0. So we can check if a number is a multiple. We need to check two things, right? A number is a multiple of 7 and the number is odd. So if we want to check if a number is a multiple of 7, we can use the modulo operator to check if n mod 7 equals 0. Then that means that we can have this section here that basically means n is a multiple of 7. And why is that? Because if this if condition is true, then we know that within these braces, whatever the code within these braces will be executed if and only if n is a multiple of 7. Now, once we are done with this, can we print out cout 1, because we need to print out 1 if it is a multiple of 7 and a multiple of and an odd number. So is it sufficient to just have this condition that says n mod 7 equals 0, and that, so that means that are all multiples of 7 odd numbers, or do we also need to check whether the number is odd or not? We need to check, right? Give me an example for when a multiple of 7 is not a odd number. I see 21, I see 7, yep, there you go, 14, right? So there are cases where a exactly 56. There are cases where a multiple of 7 is an even number. So we need to check one more thing, that is, and let's do it inside within a nested condition. So this particular condition is true if n is a multiple of 7. So we can have another nested condition inside that checks if a number is odd. Now, how do we check if a number is odd? We can check a number is odd if a number is not a multiple of 2. And we know that we can check if a number is a multiple or not by just checking the mod of that value. So we can then say n mod 2 equals to 1. That means that if I divide by 2, I would get a remainder of 1. We know that the possible remainders of dividing by 2 is either 0 or 1. If I divide a number by 2 and I get a value of 0, that means that it is an even number. And if I divide by 2 and I get a number 1, that means it's an odd number, right? So this checks n is an odd number. And since this is within this outside external if condition that also filters out numbers that are only a multiple of 7, so this additionally also checks that n is a multiple of 7. Correct? Okay. So now internally here we can then print out the statement cout. It basically means that I am checking. Yes, I'm going to talk about combining both statements, but first let's write it like this. Good point. So this basically checks n mod 7 and n mod 2 equals 1. So that is a number is a multiple of 7 and it's an odd number. Sarah, what do you mean by repeating it? So if it's a odd number or if it's a multiple of 7, and then we print out 1, and for all other cases we will just print out 0. So for that, for all other cases basically means we use the else part, right? So if and else, so the else part basically prints out 0, right? So essentially it prints out 1 if it's a multiple of 7 or it's an odd number. Otherwise it prints out 0. Not technically, but we'll come to that in a second. So let's take this piece of code. Oh, the question is, and Sarah, when you type in something, just type it to everyone so that, so in the chat window, in the drop down, you see to somebody, just send it to everyone so that everyone can see the question. So when I answer, they know what question I'm talking about. And the question is essentially print out 1 if it is a multiple of 7, if a number is a multiple of 7 and an odd number, otherwise print out 0. The main goal of writing this program is we will write it without if statements, but for now I'm going to write it using if statements. So I've copied this code and essentially I'm going to type it out in Visual Studio, right? So I have this particular code. We need to do one other thing. We need to also take input from the user about the number. So I'll cout enter a number, and then I'll see in the number using cin and then n, right? So it basically gets the number from the user and then prints out either 1 or 0. Now if I run this, now it prints out please enter a number. I give the number 21 and it prints out 1 because 21 is a odd number and it's a multiple of 7. If I give it the number 20, it should print out 0. It does because it's an even number and not, well, technically it's not a multiple of 7. Now, I want you guys to look at this code and everyone can see this code, right? In Visual Studio. Hello. Yes, yes, okay. So now tell me something. Does everyone agree that using if conditions and the thing that we wanted to achieve, which was this particular question, that is the program should print out 1 if it's a multiple of 7 and odd, otherwise it should print out 0. Now, does everyone agree that the code is correct? Okay. No. Find out a case where this code is not correct or this code will not work. and tell me why this code will not work. 35, it should work. If I run it with 35, well, if I run it with 35, then n mod 7 equals to 0. So that becomes, it's a multiple of 7, and it is an odd number, so it should print out 1. And remember that in an if and else case, exactly, in an if and else statement, only one block is going to be true and only one block of code is going to be executed. So if this condition is true, the else part will never be executed. And secondly, Alan, I'll come to your answer. Your answer is correct, but let me just look at the other things. It won't output the right value with an even and divisible by 7. Yes, exactly. Professor, do we have to type this? And I'm used to do it. This is just an example. I'm just showing you guys the solutions to these things. It's not for homework and it's not graded. It's just practicing some problems. If you want, you can follow with this particular program. As I'm typing, you can also work it on your own in Visual Studio. Okay. So Alan, you are also correct that for number 42, it won't work, but that also leads me to an interesting point that I need to make. Okay. So if I run this particular program, if I give 42, what do you guys think would be the output? Look at the code carefully and understand it's not 1, Nicholas, and everyone else, it is not 0 either. Tyler, you are right, exactly. Look at the code correctly, exactly. Look at the code correctly and see what is going to happen. If I give the number 42, then the external if condition is true. N mod 7 is 0, 42 is divisible by 7. So that particular block of code is correct, right? So now we are in this block here. Within this block, we check 42 is an odd number or not. It's not. So this if condition becomes false. And so this if condition is not executed. And then it comes out, but it will not go to the else part, right? Because this if condition was true. Only one of the two blocks will be executed. Think of an if condition as a fork in the road. You can only pick one road to go along. You can't have both of them. So once n mod 7 becomes true, then basically it's either execute this block or just jump out of this thing. So essentially when this is false, then we do not print out as 1, we just print nothing, right? Because this condition is not true. And so as far as the computer is concerned, it has executed this block of code and it comes out into this return statement here. Does that make sense as to why 42 outputs nothing? Okay, perfect. So I'll also come to a decimal value in a second. But given this situation here, there are two ways of fixing this thing. One way would be to have a single statement, as somebody said earlier, using an AND statement. Yeah, as Bria said earlier, that we can use an AND statement and combine both of them together. We are going to do this, but can someone tell me what I need to add to this code so that it would work? Can I add something to this piece of code such that our question becomes correct? Elsewhere, yeah. In the first if, add cout 0. So James, do you mean here?